Hey, what's going on, everybody? I wanted to talk about this never-ending drama regarding Jussie Smollett. Recently, the Osundario brothers, seen here on the right, have gone to federal court and filed a lawsuit against the attorneys of Jussie Smollett. Now, here's the lawsuit here. And I find it interesting that they chose to go to federal court as opposed to going to state court. Now, they live in the state of Illinois, they live in Chicago. My question is, why not just go to, to the state court or the circuit court of Cook County? Well, this type of tactic is common in situations where litigants believe they won't receive a fair trial in state court. And I guess there's reason for them to believe that. For the most part, they're probably thinking that, well, the Cook County State's attorney has dropped charges against Jussie Smollett, and it doesn't seem to be clear why they dropped these charges. It seems like maybe there was some sort of favoritism. I don't know. I mean, I'm just guessing here, or maybe there's maybe the state's attorney is in cahoots with Jussie Smollett. That may or may not be the case. I don't know. I'm just assuming. But for whatever reason, they've determined they won't get a fair trial in state court, so they've chosen to go to federal court, which is common for people in that type of situation. So here's a complaint here. Basically, it's the two brothers uh, whose nickname is Ola and Abel, and they're basically suing the lawyers of Jussie Smollett, namely Mark Garagos and Tina Glendane, and the law firm, Garagos and Garagos Law Firm. So their complaint is basically broken down in several sections. There's a complaint section, a section that talks about the parties, a section that talks about jurisdiction and venue. Jurisdiction and venue is going to be extremely important. You may not know, but if you take a case to a court that doesn't have jurisdiction and that court renders a judgment, that judgment is basically going to be void because the court never had the right to hear the case to begin with. So the lawyers who have basically filed this case are, I'm just going to assume that they know their stuff. They've studied jurisdiction and venue. Obviously they've gone to law school. They're licensed to practice in Illinois. Hopefully that they've chosen the proper jurisdiction. And maybe if I make subsequent videos, I'll break down this entire suit by the Osundario brothers. But right now, we're just going to talk about, we're just going to have kind of like a summary review of this lawsuit. So there's this jurisdiction and venue section. There's also a choice of law section. This complaint will allege violations of the torts of defamation and false light, which is actually interesting because I've never heard of a false light claim. Again, if I break this lawsuit down in subsequent videos, maybe we'll get into false light and see exactly what that is. And then there's a section that basically talks about, the facts of the case. This section is basically going to talk about the what actually happened and how things came to arrive to where they are, right? So it basically, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically just give you an idea. On around the morning of January 29th, 2019, it was virally reported that the actor Jussie Smollett was attacked in Chicago's Streetville neighborhood while walking home. And it's basically going to give you the basic details of what happened. Mr. Smollett had reported to Chicago police that two men in ski masks pulled a noose around his neck and poured an unknown liquid on his body. So again, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but I think you get the gist. This section is just basically giving you the background information of the case. And then it goes on to count one, which is actually the claims against the lawyers in this case. And it basically is count one is a common law defamation per se. And it basically is going to talk about or allege some of the statements that were made by the lawyers, and we'll go skip down to line 25. All the statements alleged below were in concert and coordination with defendant Mark Garagos and defendant Garagos and Garagos law firm. Mrs. Gladians, Mrs. Glendane insisted Mr. Smollett is innocent of making false police reports and falsely adding that the plaintiffs criminally attacked Mr. Smollett. Mrs. Glandian then falsely submitted the plaintiffs may have been wearing whiteface while attacking Mrs. Smollett, again stating the plaintiffs battered Mrs. Smollett and adding the implication that this battery was a hate crime. So, the lawsuit in this section is basically going to talk about some of the false allegations that were made by the lawyers of Smollett. And then there's different parts of this section. Part two, the statements harming the plaintiffs in their profession and implying a lack of integrity in the plaintiff's professional duties. There's another section, part three of count one, statement falsely accusing plaintiffs of engaging in fornication with Mr. Smollett. So they're alleging that Mrs. Smollett was actually sleeping with one of the brothers, or probably both of them, well, at least Bola Osundario. And then just moving along, there's a second count called common law false light, count two. And the plaintiffs hereby re-allege and incorporate their allegation, paragraphs 1 through 169 of account 1 as their prospective allegations, and 1 through 69 and count 2 as though fully set forth herein. And then they go on to say Mrs. Glendane made false statements to the third parties, press, and public that plaintiffs committed hate crime, perjured themselves, and conspired to make false statements to Chicago Police Department. And moving right along, there's account 3, common law defamation per se, and there is account 4, common law false light. Again, I've never heard of false light. Maybe we'll get into it in subsequent videos, but for the most part, this is. Oh, there's also count 5, respondent, defendant Garagos and law firm. Count 5, respondent superior. And I have no idea what this is. At all relevant times, the defendant Tina Glendane, and Mark Garagos were acting with their scope of employment as employer, employee, and partner, respectively, of Garagos and Garagos law firm. The law firm is responsible for. Oh, I think this count is somehow binding the lawyer's actions to the actual law firm. And then they're also asking for a jury demand, which is pretty interesting. Why would you choose a jury as opposed to, letting a judge decide? I think, they probably are choosing a jury because they want to invoke an emotional response from the jury. Whereas, in my opinion, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not, licensed to practice law, so I can't give legal advice. So definitely take everything with a grain of salt. Essentially, I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes down to law, but I think if I were in their case, I would want to go to a jury because a jury would probably be more understanding. A jury is not necessary, even though they're obligated to use a law, they're going to be more inclined to see the human side of things as opposed to just the legal side of things. Whereas I think if you went to a judge, the judge is probably going to be strictly by the book. Of course, judges are human, but I think the obligations of the judge is going to be to lean towards the book, whereas a jury will be naturally inclined just to see the human element. But any rate, that's it. This is the lawsuit, the federal lawsuit that the Osundario brothers are essentially claiming against the lawyers of Jussie Smollett. Definitely leave your questions, comments below. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe and let me know what you think about this lawsuit, and also let me know if you want me to try to do a breakdown of this lawsuit. That's it. Thank you. Bye.